This weekend on the Rochester Press Box from Salvatore's Pizzeria at the historic Garage Door Restaurant.
I'm Jim Mandelaro from the Democrat and Chronicle, and I'll tell you why the best-kept secret in baseball may reside in Minneapolis.
And I'm John DiTullio. I'll tell you why hate is a good thing in sports.
And I'm Dan Fetes, and I'm going to tell you why Garrett Cole needs to learn the lesson of if you don't want them to celebrate, don't let them score.
I'm Bill Pucko. Celebrity notoriety and the law, a toxic mix. Join us this week in the Rochester Press Box from Salvatore's Pizzeria. The Rochester Press Box is brought to you by Salvatore's at the Garage Door, Rochester's choice winner for Best Pizzeria, featuring Wacky Wing Wednesday and the Super Slice. It's as big as your head. The games are always on at the Garage Door, home to the Rochester Press Box. Hey everyone, and thanks for joining us here in the Rochester Press Box from Salvatore's Pizzeria at the historic Garage Door Restaurant. I'm Bill Pucko, joined as always by John DiTullio.
Billy, it's great to be back.
Danny Fetes from the High School Sports Beat, Classy Wolf Media. Good to have you here again.
Thanks for having me.
And our first timer, Jim Mandelaro, the baseball beat writer for our Democrat Chronicle.
Hey guys.
Thanks for being in. So let's go right to the Rochester Red Wings. You see a lot about this. What's the limited with the weather and everything, what's the experience been like at the ballpark so far this year?
Tough for the fans. I mean, it's a pretty good team. Good combination of young guys. Danny Santana's a great prospect. The Alex Meyer pitcher. Some veterans. Good team, but when it's 40 degrees out, nobody wants to watch baseball. It's funny, they'll brave the cold for the Bills, but until it warms up, I don't think fans are going to get the true experience.
It's like the eternal debate, hitters versus pitchers, who's got the advantage when the weather is cold. Do you notice over the course of the years of this, who does have an edge?
It's funny. I always feel bad for the pitchers, and then they always tell me they're the warmest guy on the field. They've got sometimes the short sleeves, because they're always moving. I feel more bad for the guy in right field. That ball one, ball two, strike one. So I think the pitchers have the advantage.
Yeah, I always feel kind of good. The baseball season starts here in Rochester. There's this inner part of me that says, I want to apologize for our city.
I know.
Because it's so miserable in
I
April.
won't go to a game, and maybe if they have one of these businessman specials, whatever they're calling it now, I may hit one of those games, but I'm not taking my family until it's guaranteed 80 degrees or above. I'm serious. It's just, like Jimmy said, it's ridiculous. The weather's been horrible. But, the Red Wings on paper, watching, listening to the games and looking at their roster, you're right, a combination of some veteran players in their mid to late 20s with some young players. So on paper, they got a good team. It's just too bad no one's going to see them until June.
Until June.
I'm not going to
Danny,
see them.
you've played in this stuff. How bad is it?
You get used to it. Unfortunately, playing at Fredonia in upstate New York, it's cold. You get a lot of time in gyms. And like I said, I think there's definitely an advantage towards the pitchers early on. He talks about them being the warmest players out there, especially you get to that, your hands are cold, you're breaking bats, you're getting stingers. It's just not fun. You're not comfortable up there, especially like John said, until it's June or July when it's actually warm.
It is still, I remember our good friend George Bain, the late great George Bain, I'd ask him about Frontier Field, and he says, anyone that hasn't been to Frontier Field ought to go to confession. That was his great line. And it says, it's still pretty cool out there, isn't it?
It's never better than when it's full. Those nights in July or August when it's a Friday night and they're having fireworks, and it's just the magic. There's a buzz in the air, and it's a great ballpark. We're lucky to have it. It's funny though. You're talking about the weather. No matter what the weather, there'll be somebody there. I mean, last Monday, I had a 45-minute rain delay. There's 4 people left. 4 people. So if they called the game, but if they had played it, they would have played for 4 people. But you want to go down and say, do you guys have homes? Like, how did you get in here? Where are you sleeping tonight? But it's a great place.
But they'll announce 2,000.
Well, they'll announce 2,000 because they go with paid attendance, and I said, if nobody showed up at all, they'd have 2,000 people because that's probably their season ticket base. And that's what they go with.
Of the 3 arenas, I guess, Salem, Blue Cross, and Frontier Field, we'll have the Policini Center soon. I still get most excited. If you're telling me which one I want to go to for anything, I don't care if it's for a concert. I prefer going to Frontier Field. Not to take anything away from the other arenas. Well, I don't like the Blue Cross Arena. But I think Salem Stadium's nice, but I love going to Frontier Field. It still has that, that magical essence, or so when you walk into that joint.
But that's about baseball parks. I mean, we don't fall in love with the hockey arenas, the football stadiums, stuff. This is something that's very unique to baseball, right?
Yeah, you have that connection of the ballpark, family, baseball, America's pastime. I think you kind of fall in love with that, nostalgic that is the baseball field.
Alrighty, when we return, we'll get into the NBA playoffs. Welcome back to the Rochester Press Box. We are here from Salvatore's Pizzeria at the historic Garage Door Restaurant. A tremendous sports bars, a lot of TVs. They get the sound up on the key game, Wacky Wings Wednesday, and live music every Friday night. Johnny, the NBA playoffs, one of your favorite things.
I love it.
More than we bargained for out of this first round.
Well, the Western Conference, to me, is out of control. It's so loaded. You look at, Memphis is the 7 seed. I mean, come on. They could be a 1. They would be a 2 seed, if not a 3. In the East. I think the West, I can make a case for about 4 or 5 teams that come out. In the East, I'll make a case for 1 team. That's Miami.
Not Washington?
Indiana's a mess. Washington's fun with Wall and Beal in the backcourt and Gortat. They've got they're interesting, so to speak, because they've been miserable for so many years. But I can imagine Washington getting to the Eastern Conference Finals. No one's beaten Miami. Indiana's not. Atlanta. Possibly Brooklyn, I would give maybe a small chance, but it's LeBron's show in the NBA Finals for a 4th straight year.
You guys watching basketball?
Yeah, and I'm not counting out the Indiana Pacers just yet. One bad game, I'm not counting them out just yet. For as bad as they played in that second half, they still were the number 1 seed in the East. And they still have a better record than the Heat, and they still were able to beat the Heat in big games, even when they weren't playing well. They were able to elevate their game. They've got the right pieces. If they can get it together, which is the big if.
Fragilely, they're such a mess. Their bench the other night bailed them out in Game 2 against the Hawks.
I mean, that happened to a team before.
Hibbert's a mess, and Paul George is now no longer, I think, a top 5 player anymore. I think, and then you find out Frank Vogel's coaching for his job right now.
Amazing.
Well, I agree with you in principle, Miami, but it's all about stealing home court advantage. I mean, Indiana's the top seed. If Miami can get that, I mean, yeah, who can argue with those guys, LeBron and company? But, Washington is an interesting story. I think I read they won 19 games on the road the last 3 years. They have 22 this year. They've learned to win on the road, so they proved against the Bulls, but flash in the pan, not going to go. NBA playoffs is a marathon. I mean, that thing's going on for another 2 months, and it's going to be hard for them to withstand it. So, kind of agree with you, Miami.
The Bulls have been exposed, though, haven't they? And that has repercussions to the whole Knicks thing.
Absolutely. I think Carmelo is good. If you're the Bulls and Tom Thibodeau, you make a run at Carmelo Anthony. You have to. You don't know what Derrick Rose's future is. They are so fundamentally sound. They play great defense. They rebound. They cannot score. Jordan, if Jordan was on that team, he'd average at least 20. They just don't have a score without Derrick Rose on the floor.
So what's keeping him there? We went around the panel a couple of weeks ago and asked, should Carmelo leave New York and will he? And we were unanimous and said he should and he won't. What's keeping him there?
I don't know what's keeping you there, because if I'm Carmelo, I see the pieces that are around in Chicago, and that's still that big market. And I've talked to my buddies before. Is there a better center all around in the game than Joakim Noah? Offensively, rebounding, assists, his plays through injuries. The guy's an animal, and he was rewarded this year with being the Defensive Player of the Year. But that guy's a beast. That's a guy, if I'm Carmelo, I want to be around, because he's going to help me win games.
He can pay him more, but you're around professional athletes and a lot of money, all that. How much is enough money, and why is the dollar weighted so heavily in a decision like this with the Carmelo Anthony?
I have no idea, Bill. And then you get a guy like Kirby Puckett stayed his whole career in Minnesota. Of course, he did win a couple World Series, but it was Minnesota. You get guys that just re-up. Joe Mauer's going to stay there the rest of his career in Minnesota, and they're one of the worst teams in baseball right now. I know he's from there. Carmelo just might like New York, and now they throw the Phil Jackson factor in, and there's this renewed optimism, and it is New York. Sometimes you fall in love with where you play, but how much money is too much money? I don't know. As far as I know, the Red Sox offered Ellsbury $120 million, and that wasn't enough money, so you don't know.
We saw LeBron leave his hometown. And Carmelo's from New York, and so I wouldn't be surprised if he bolts for Chicago.
So I was going to run it by you again. That says, should he move and will he move?
Yes, and yes.
Really?
Yeah, I believe
and
so.
To Chicago?
I think Chicago, there or Houston, but I would pick Chicago. East, you got a better shot. All you got to do is contend with Miami. The West, you've got 8 teams that could get out of there.
Would that be a fun team to see with him on it? Man, with Joakim Noah and Carlos, that would be a good thing to watch. Like it or not, when we return. Welcome back. This is the Rochester Press Box from Salvatore's Pizzeria at the historic Garage Door Restaurant. And just down the road, East Ridge Road, Arthur Treacher's doing very well. You can drop in and have lunch there if you don't come and see us on a Wednesday. Like it or not, expanded playoffs, Danny.
I don't like it. I think that baseball and football have had enough. I don't think football needs to extend their playoffs anymore. Obviously, it used to be in January, the Super Bowl, and now we're getting into February. I think we've had enough there of the games and the competition there. With baseball, it's nice. It's kind of like that in-between phase where you're able to get that one playoff game. But obviously, I'm a Braves fan, and a couple of years ago, that one playoff game didn't bode so well for us. So I'm not a huge fan of just the one playoff game system. But it does bring more teams in the mix. I think it accomplished that goal for what baseball wanted, to have more teams, not as many teams tanking it and becoming sellers. There's more teams becoming buyers at the deadline, like the Royals. It opens up more the markets for most teams.
It's getting harder and harder to be a dynasty as a result, though, isn't it?
Absolutely. There's more levels of playoffs. You got to win. In that baseball, you got to win 3 playoff series.
There used to be just one. And they talk about it being the golden age of baseball, 2 8-team leagues, the winners play in the World Series.
Yeah.
It doesn't work anymore, does it?
No. You wonder how many World Series the Yankees would have won. They would have been upset along the way somewhere when they won 5 in a row. Those great years, 48 to 53, and it's just a lot harder now.
I still love the best of 5, though.
Love that.
In the division round, I love that. I loved when the NBA used to do best of 3 in the first round.
But we used to lobby for the 7. Everything should be 7 in baseball.
I completely disagree. I think hockey and NBA have extended best of 7 now in the first round. You want to talk about player safety, and these seasons are extended way too long. I'm with Fetes. You think the NFL, if you're going to preach safety, you can't extend the season. You can't do it.
All right, Johnny, like it or not, class action texting suits.
I thought at times I can be a miserable person, I guess, when my team. This guy who filed the class action suit is the most miserable man, I think.
Bring us up to speed on
Yeah, he basically signed up for texting from the Bills and got too many messages from the Bills, so I guess the Bills broke a federal law. Kudos to the Bills. That kind of spun it in their favor. They handed out debit cards worth, I don't know how many millions of dollars that you have to use at their store. So the Bills finally do something right. They exceed expectations, and yet they still can't get out of their own way. Send the dude a pacifier, the biggest baby. Of all the problems we have in our world, he's moaning because he's getting too many text messages from his so-called favorite team.
Yeah. I hear John say on the radio, it says, I want to meet the guy who represented the Bills in this case and settled for $3 million.
Yeah. Well, they'll just raise concession prices or they'll get their money back. But you know what? Adjust your settings. Instead of filing a lawsuit, turn your phone off or call the Bills and say I'm getting too much.
It was 3 extra text messages over the course of 2 weeks.
And they won. This dude won.
That is really sad. Like it or not, Jimmy, Albert Pujols, the guy we kind of forgot about.
Absolutely. He went away to Anaheim and he kind of disappeared, at least in the eastern stratosphere, and got hurt. And we kind of thought, the guy's in his 30s now and maybe he's forgotten it, but he's a heck of a player. I think he's also watered down by the steroid era. Not that he himself was doing it, but 26 guys have hit 500 homers now. 11 have done it since 1999. So there used to be your instant ticket to 500 to the Hall of Fame, and he's going to get there. But I think we just take it for granted what 500 home runs means. That is an amazing amount of home runs. But he's a Hall of Famer, and wish he had stayed in St. Louis. I'm a purist like that. I wish guys had built their legacy. He could have been the second coming of Stan Musial. Now he's out in Anaheim, but he's a great player.
2 years ago, we were talking about him being potentially the best ever. I mean, is that still in the discussion?
No, I don't think so. There's been some suspicions. Jack Clark went on the radio and says, I know for a fact. Yeah. I think I discount everybody who's put up numbers in the last X amount of years. I just don't. He hit 500 home runs, no big deal. I really don't care that Albert Pujols has 500 home runs.
Yeah, what do you make of the Jack Clark thing, though? I mean, Clark comes out on St. Louis radio. He says this: Pujols sues him, the station fires him, and he apologizes.
Well, if I'm going to go on the air with that, I've got to have, I would think, a legitimate source. I would hope so, and have the backing from my station. If I went on the air and claim the best player in baseball is using, and a guy from St. Louis told me this. So I tend to believe Jack Clark, but then he gets sued, he gets fired. I don't know. The only thing I know is that Pujols fits the profile. He's Dominican. Yeah. And the Dominican, he's big, and he is starting to break down as he gets later in his career.
It's in the culture. Unfinished business when we return. Welcome back to the Rochester Press Box here from Salvatore's Pizzeria at the historic Garage Door Restaurant. One of our favorite places, pizza slices as big as your head. I haven't said that in a while. Missed it. John?
Billy, I'm just to show you how much I've evolved and matured since I've been on this program. I'm all about hating sports, man. I'm loving it. I love when millionaires fight other millionaires. Well, how often? You won't see CEOs of companies going at it, but you got millionaires in hockey and baseball players fighting each other because somebody stood and posed while he watched what he thought was a home run, and the pitcher was also making millions of dollars, took offense to it. Carlos Gomez and Garrett Cole, I love it. Now we've got a great rivalry between the bad boys of the Brewers and the Pittsburgh Pirates. Jacoby Ellsbury comes back to Fenway Park, he gets booed. Loved it. And I also love the fact that what's going on between St. Louis and Chicago, Seabrook takes out Backus, and you've got the Blackhawk fans taunting Backus, who is down on the ice with a concussion. Listen, I know it's all about player safety and things like that, but as I said, when you can get millionaires fighting millionaires over a hockey game or a baseball game, I'm all for it. Why shouldn't guys compete against other guys and throw at each other and act like kids? Isn't that what we want in our athletes? Yeah, we want sportsmanship, but the fact that these guys are making millions of dollars and are giving it their all, I'm all for it. I have come around. Isn't that a mature take? Carlos Gomez is great for baseball. And I think what the Blackhawks and the Blues are doing is great for hockey. That's what hockey is all about.
We are interested. Jimmy?
Well, you know, you asked today, how much is too much in baseball? How much to make in a salary? Chris Colabello, one of my favorite all-time Red Wings, MVP last year for the Red Wings, could have cashed it in, got offered $1 million to play in Korea with no guarantee of making the Twins. Said, no, I don't want the money. I want to make it to the majors. Spent 7 years in the independent league. 7 years, no one gave him a sniff of even organized baseball. So he goes to spring training, has the best spring training of anyone on the Twins, makes the team. Now, going into the weekend, he is among the American League leaders in batting average, doubles, hit his home run last night, RBIs. He's 4 away from the Twins record for RBIs in April. Just a fantastic guy, and he's going to have fame and fortune. You know, he waited it out. This guy made $350 a month when he played in the independent league. They put his salary on the cover of a magazine. He said, no wonder nobody wanted to date me. Now he's making what are they making in the majors? $2,500 a day, but it doesn't matter to him. I asked him last year, where would you rather be? He said, it really doesn't matter. I love baseball. Sure, you'd rather be up in the majors, make the money. Loves baseball. Great story of perseverance.
Yeah, and he had that just historically good season with the Red Wings last year that, you know, it really, when you look back through their history, it was right up there with the best ever.
89 games, and he's the MVP, and people may balk at that and say 89 games, but he had 24 home runs in a half a season. One of the great seasons.
All right, Danny.
I'm going to go a step farther for what John said. Carlos Gomez hit a fly ball against Pittsburgh last week, and he thought he said was going to be caught. That's why he stood at home plate. The ball wasn't caught. It caromed off the center field wall and ricocheted around, and Gomez made it all the way into third. The pitcher for the Pirates, Garrett Cole, took offense to that and didn't like it one bit, and gave his piece, gave a piece of his mind to Carlos Gomez, who's been very flamboyant and flashy throughout the year. And Carlos Gomez took offense to it, got all heated, and one of the worst bench-clearing brawls we've seen in a long time, probably since the Cardinals and the Reds, and had people kicking at each other against the backstop. As much as I don't like Carlos Gomez, I'm not condoning his actions, you have to take a step back and realize what Garrett Cole was actually doing. Carlos Gomez just hit a ball 400 feet off of you, and you're sitting there chirping at him at third base. What do you have to say about that? And it always goes back to, I thought about the Miami Hurricanes back when they were playing in their heyday in the 80s. If you don't want them to celebrate, don't let them score. Garrett Cole instigated that. Carlos Gomez took it to another level, but Garrett Cole, you need to watch yourself and keep your mouth shut.
Reuben Hurricane Carter died last week at the age of 76. As a cultural icon, but there's still so much we don't know about this guy. He was a middleweight fighter, maybe a little undersized, could have been a champion, maybe he wasn't. Was he a murderer? Was he not? We really don't know. You might remember that there was in the racially charged 60s, in 1966, Hurricane Carter and another person were charged and convicted of a triple homicide at a bar in Paterson, New Jersey. He wound up going to prison where he wrote an autobiography which caught the attention of one Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan meets Carter, produces the song Hurricane. Public opinion now is all in favor of him. You know, bad trial, he was railroaded, he gets another trial, he's convicted again. Spent some more years in prison, still the same kind of thing. Public opinion is all on his side. Eventually, he gets what is called the conviction set aside, and he's a free man. The family of those 3 victims of the homicide never got their justice. You look later on, this isn't just an issue for the 1960s, you look later on, O.J. Simpson was acquitted of a double murder charge on evidence that had nothing to do as to whether he actually committed the killings or not. And on this day, even now, Jameis Winston is the rape victim, the alleged rape victim, somebody whose the law didn't protect, or is Jameis Winston simply being smeared? We don't know the answers to those things, and we probably never will for sure. What we do know is that celebrity, notoriety, and the law is a very toxic mix, because the American judicial system is neither deaf nor blind. We produce the Rochester Press Box here from the Garage Door Restaurant, Salvatore's Pizzeria, every Wednesday afternoon at 12:30. We invite you to come down, watch the production of the show, meet the guys. They're all good guys. We highly recommend that. John, thank you very much.
Thank you much,
Danny,
Billy.
good job. Jim, nice to have you.
Thank you, Billy.
Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week.